Hello and welcome to this video from zonalaudio.com. Today we're going to be looking at this new product, Schranz Drums Template, and within it is 5 groups with different type of drums for hard techno, industrial techno, scrange, all that good stuff. What this video will be is just a quick run through of the beats. We'll go into a bit more detail on some of them, and I'll provide some interesting use cases to how you might make the most out of this template. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can download this template now from zonalaudio.com. We'll leave a link at the top of the description. So let's begin by just playing through some of these. So very fast, very frantic, very dance floor driven, lots of processing, saturation, distortion, compression, limiting, etc. So we'll take a look at the first 2 of these, and on the face of them, the first one looks a bit more complex compared to this one, but there's lots of similarities and there's still quite a lot going on in both of them. So let's jump in to some of these. We'll take a look at the kick bass first on this one. So 3 different tracks grouped. So we've got the kick and the sub and the roll. And you might be able to hear already there's quite a lot of noise and actually some bit reduction on this, and quite a lot of processing on the actual group, and that is what really can make sounds fit together and be kind of more as one. You can see we've got some group processing actually on the overall group of all the drums as well, and typically there is some kind of processing on the top of each group, not for the cymbals. Cymbals don't generally need a great deal of processing, but for the kick, so just in a drum rack, 1 sample, but we've got some EQ. We'll listen to it completely dry. So as you can see there, it is a distorted 909 kick drum from the off, and then a bit of EQ to take out some honky mud and some boost on the low end, saturation makes it a little bit more crispy, and then some EQ to take out the super lows and a bit more kind of muddiness in the 100 Hz area. And sub, a different kick, which we have just put a little bit of attack on to make sure it's not clicky, and we've moved the start point so we remove the transient of the kick and we get more of a subby sound. Very basic, filtering out of any high end. And then the roll, so 2 different kicks, very low velocity, but the fact that that second kick is hitting there gives that kind of rolling kind of feel, and then some delay and some echo, auto filter, so we want to take out the super lows because we've got the sub handling that. So taking out some of the honky frequencies, and then kind of giving the whole sound a bit more warmth and drive with overdrive, and then tweaking that again with EQ to fit with the other elements, and then sidechain at the end. On this occasion, it is sidechained from the kick. You'll see in other times in the project we have used a sidechain trigger. There's pros and cons to doing it. There's no right and wrong way. Then when we listen to all these together, and if we turn off all the group processing, you'll hear how these sounds really come together. Without the processing, sounds a little bit weak and not really upfront or powerful. I should add at this point that when doing this kind of processing, you do need to be careful not to be adding too much gain. So without all processing, we're at -13, which is a bit low. If we turn it all on, we're at -10. Now you might notice we have a limiter at the end here, and we're pushing into that limiter quite a lot. So the process is adding a lot of gain, but then we're using a limiter to basically stop adding too much gain. So all of these processes enhance certain frequencies. Obviously the EQ reduces some when we need to. It introduces new harmonics. It makes it sound fuller. In doing that, we typically make it louder. In kind of traditional production theory, what we would do throughout all the processing is make sure we're not actually adding gain at all. We would make sure any process we do is matched, and we might use a gain plugin to do that, or we might use like an output on the saturator to do that. So that process is applied up to a point, but we're in the realm of hard techno here and more kind of industrial sounds, and we can kind of abuse these tools a little bit to get a more aggressive and hard sound. So that's kind of what's going on here with this type of processing. So again, we'll go from the start. So with the amp, and the amp plugin in Ableton is something you need to be quite careful with when you're using it, especially on kicks. This presence parameter, if it's left quite high, it can give quite an unpleasant alteration to the attack of the kick. And here you can hear it's changing the sound significantly, but it's only on 34% wet. So then compensating some volume with a gain plugin and then the redux. Gives it more of a kind of lo-fi, gritty texture. Saturator for a bit more harmonics and warmth. And this saturator on the hard curve really does increase the gain significantly. We're only on 26% and we have compensated on the output a little bit. And then some EQ. So again, taming those honky, muddy frequencies in the low mids. Adding a bit of lows, adding a bit of highs. The compressor at the end gives it a bit more of a solid sound. We've got the attack on auto, the release on auto, and quite a fast attack here on a ratio of 4. And then the limiter, we're kind of driving into it on purpose, whilst also using it as literally as a limiter, but also slightly as a creative tool to give more of a loud pumping sound. So with and without all that processing. Cool, so now let's look at the first lot of drums. As you can see, we've got lots and lots of layered drums here. So this one is more of a texture kind of sound made up of 3 different loops. And they are processed a little bit individually and then just a little bit of sidechain. So this is a auto pan set up to essentially be a pseudo sidechain and just ducks out of the way of kick a little bit. Okay, and then the next channel. So 2 reversed claps that are positioned quite strategically to sound like they're kind of rolling over one another. And when we combine that with the kick, gives that kind of scrapey, scratchy, push and pull in the sound, and combined with the first loop. And then this group tops 2, pretty heavy processing on this one. So we have a chopped up Amen break with some amp, some heavy sidechain, some pretty elaborate EQ, and an auto filter, which is automated. And then the second Amen is basically warped in audio. Really short loop, dirtied up with some echo, some saturation and amp. So that's pretty heavy processing if we remove all that. And then the final one in this group. So this is a really heavily distorted kick drum, and we have then distorted it even more. And you'll see this EQ here, and it's kind of boosting the highs, but then we're going into the tops and we've cut out, you know, way below that. But it does kind of give a bit more texture and push a bit more of those lower frequencies through to the group processing. So it's really, really quiet, and it's called Utter Filth on the channel. It's just to give that kind of gritty texture. And then the processing on the group. So obviously it takes out a lot of that low end, and that could be something that you alter when you get this project, but there's so much going on in the low end here that we do need to leave a certain amount of room for that. Next we have the cymbals, 5 different channels in here. Let's go through them. The first one, I don't even know what it is. It's some audio recaptured at some point during the making of this. Makes for a really dirty kind of hi-hat. The MIDI, we've got a harder note on the upbeat and then softer notes either side. And then the next one, this is actually just a white noise hi-hat made in Operator. Quite a bit of processing. So we've gone from that to that. EQ, overdrive, echo is not actually active there. It's the delay, giving it that bouncy feeling. There's a sidechain compressor there which isn't in use, but you could add to it, and then some pretty heavy limiting and a little bit of EQ afterwards. The next one is a 16th 909 hi-hat. So again, you've seen with the MIDI, this one is obviously very basic. This is, you know, very intentionally varied velocity. Same with this one. And then we have 2 rides, one on the beat and one which is kind of delayed with a slower attack, and then bringing them together. Cool, so you may have noticed some variations in the sound there. That is on the group processing. We'll go into that very shortly, but we'll just quickly look at the little fills here. So this is just a simple hardcore kick sample. But again, it's got that group processing happening, which we'll look at very shortly. And the resample is the whole beat resampled onto one track using the resampling here, and then record enable, and then just play back your track, and that will record whatever is going out of the master output back onto the track. And we can see it's just like the resampled beat and then chopped up. So let's have a listen to that. So again, the group processing is going on there. So we've got these audio effect racks turning on and off. So it's a little bit complicated, probably a little bit more intermediate, you might say, this kind of technique. And you could hear it in the intro. But if I open all these up, looks a little bit complex, a little bit crazy. They are all on for the intro, and then they kind of turn on and off in sequence. Let's listen to that again. So you can see them all turning on and off there. The first one, just a basic auto filter and automation on the frequency. The second one is EQ, reverb, echo, more EQ, pseudo sidechain, and a utility to alter the gain. Let's see that one come on. So that's this one. And so that's used sparingly at the start there and here to give that kind of impact before the fill. The next one is this one, so that's used in conjunction there. But you could use these individually. So this one, an amp, and again, I have changed the pseudo sidechain to be 16th notes, so really fast and choppy. And yeah, it's kind of a hectic workflow, but achieves a hectic sound, if that's what we're after. So let's have a look at the actual final group processing. You might notice the Live 8 compressor here. Don't worry about that. That will load up just fine. It was the case with Live 10 when it first came out that the compressor was clicky. I think they've fixed that now. But yeah, we have some compression, 4:1 ratio, fast attack, faster release, 100% wet. Let me turn off the other things. So it kind of squashes the sound a little bit, gives it a bit more, it sounds a little bit tighter. And then we've got a saturator on hard curve. It's doing quite a lot. This is going up to 80% wet. You can see we've taken some output down. So yeah, really makes it sound hard and aggressive. And then some sweetening EQ. And then finally pushing into a limiter. So you can see the similarities of the processing from the kick bass also in the group processing, similar kind of style. And then finally pushing into a limiter with the ceiling at -9. And you can see we're doing quite a lot of gain reduction there. That's pretty heavy limiting. So we are trying to achieve a loud, squashed sound. You can adjust this to taste, but the reason it's set at -9 is that is probably going to be a good approximate overall volume for your drums in the final mix down. So again, just a useful way to get ideas down really, really quickly. And you can, yeah, obviously pick and choose some of these elements. So let's look at number 2 now. So on the face of it, it looks a little bit more simple. There's less channels on the group. We still have quite a bit of processing. Again, you'll see similarities. We've got some on macros there. We'll take a look at those shortly, but let's look at the kick and the bass first. So again, heavy processing on the group of the kick and the bass, which is then going into more group processing. And this has a lot going on in the kick. So just the kick alone has 3 different channels, the dry channel, and then this bounce channel, and then this high channel. So on the bounce one, as you might expect, we've got some delay, and then we're using an auto filter for some surgical EQ here, and then an echo. So we have the first delay on 100% wet, and then the echo on 8th note dotted with a slight variation, which we can actually change on the bounce shift macro. And that one is on 50% wet. So let's listen to how that sounds. So it's the kick as it is, and then it's the first delay on 100% wet, and then the echo on 50% or 48. So that's giving us that kind of bouncing, rolling sound. And then the bounce shift macro, if you keep your eye on the echo there, it just alters the groove. So you can alter that to taste. And then after the delay, there is overdrive, EQ, and sidechain to dirty it up a little bit. And then the high channel. So this echo is quite interesting because there's actually some modulation on it. Typically, I wouldn't advise doing modulation in kind of low-end material, but this is more to do with the mid and the high and giving that kind of gritty texture up at the top, and that can benefit from some movement. The rate is on 3 here. You could do anything from kind of half a bar, maybe up to 4 bars, and then we're going into an echo at 100% wet, shortish decay time, and then the erosion is quite key to this sound. So yeah, really gives it that gritty feel, and maybe you could hear the filter there. So what's actually happening when we do this on the modulation here, when we increase the filter, the mod to filter, it is modulating these parameters based on what we set here. So a sawtooth up every 3 bars. And then we have an auto chopper, which is an auto pan with the phase to 0 and then set to 16th. Again, gives it that kind of choppy, gritty feeling. And then compression from the kick and a little bit of final EQ to make sure we don't have anything conflicting with all those low elements that we've got going on. And then all of that is sent into a drum bus. So again, giving it more harmonics, more punch, more grit, more drive, and then again, some kind of sweetening EQ, taking out the super lows, some muddy honky frequencies, and then exaggerating the highs. You can see this one is actually set to mid-side. So because we've got quite a lot of delay and reverb processing on a low-end element, we just want to make sure that we are taking out the lows of the stereo field. So it's cut at 84, and then there's also a little bit of a shelf in the lower mids. So onto the drums for this one. So basically 4 audio channels, and the first one so it's a loop, which again I think has just been resampled from something else, and then a delay and a sidechain. So that can give like a nice funky feeling to the groove. The next one is a crowd loop, so just like a recording of some atmosphere. And then that's heavily processed with overdrive, EQ, and some dynamics. We have been careful to kind of time up things going in here. It is just a 1-bar loop and repeating over. But the way these kind of vocals dance around with the compression and the dynamics against the kick, again, makes the sound quite funky. Okay, and And then next, similar to in the first one where we had 2 reverse claps, here we've got 2 reverse rides. And again, they're positioned so they're kind of falling over one another and they create a good groove with the kick. Gives that kind of, again, fast pull and push kind of feel to the groove. So the first one is heavily processed. We've got some delay, a utility to reduce the width of that delay, and then the vocoder and the pedal doing a lot of the main work here. And you know, you could bring down the dry wet of these. And then again, some dynamics processing. So without that, gives it more energy, and then obviously taking out all of the lows and just taming some of the highs here. And then the second ride processing is a bit more simple. But you'll see here we've got 2 instances of EQ, one before and one after the other processing. Because ride cymbals can have like significant resonances, in this particular instance the ride doesn't need to be forward in the mix, so we have reduced any kind of ringing frequencies and then tamed it some more afterwards as well. The pedal itself will help with that. It'll help kind of smear those frequencies. So we're just going to zoom in here and actually look at the timing of these samples. So this is kind of where a bit more attention to detail comes in with production. You can see that the very end of this is chopped off before the bar. And you might assume you just drop a ride in, so it ends there, and then you'd hit reverse and then it goes up to that point. And then with this one, we have the end of the ride chopped off. So here is a 1 bar section, but there is a tiny variation here and here, and this is obviously stopping just before the beat, giving that real kind of sucking feel and makes it a little bit more energetic on the whole. So let's listen to them together. So something that you wouldn't consciously pick up on, but as it adds up with all the other elements, can just give that little bit of extra X factor to the sound. Okay, so more group processing on the drums. So dirtying it up a bit, adding more harmonics, making sure we're taking out the lows, and then some heavy sidechain compression from the kick. So here we've actually assigned some macros to the processing. We've got grit, gritty, and limit. And the grit is the saturator, the gritty is the overdrive, and you can see even though I'm putting the macro to the max, we've actually set the saturator to be maximum of 50 and the overdrive to be a maximum of 18% wet. So we want to enhance the overall sound, but we don't want to destroy it. So we're kind of giving the chance just to blend in as much of that extra kind of harshness. So in terms of good ways to use this template, I'm here in a empty live set, just a new default set, and I've navigated to the .als file, and we could just open the .als file and then choose what we want, either just a whole beat or some sections from another one, and delete what we don't need. Alternatively, we could navigate in the browser, and then this is each group, and we can open this up, and then we could grab, say, the main beat from 4 and drag that in. Do have a little bit of patience when doing this. It's loading quite a lot of information, so it takes a little while. So we could get the main beat from 4, and we can see the MIDI's over here. And then we might go to 5 and get the loops from 5. And again, just be a little bit patient when we're dropping it. And then we can grab them and put them in line. And we want to set it to an appropriate tempo. So we can kind of mix and match. So let's grab the loops from the first one. And then obviously the MIDI is, sorry, the actual information is going to be a little bit out of the way, but so then let's go grab one more. Let's get the hat from number 3. And we can even go in and grab individual tracks as well as groups. So a really useful and handy way just to come up with some fresh ideas and really get the juices flowing. So yeah, that's about it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy this kind of content. If you do, don't forget to like and subscribe. And you can get access to all of these beats by downloading the Schranz Drums template on zonalaudio.com. Until next time.